Hello and welcome back to Next Gen New Mexico. From Albuquerque, I'm your host, Joshua Neal, and today we have a special guest joining us, Amy Barela, the chair of the Republican Party of New Mexico. Amy has been a strong leader in our state's political landscape, fighting for conservative values and election integrity. Today, we'll be discussing Senate Bill 218, a major piece of legislation that aims to change how elections are administered here in New Mexico. Senate Bill 218 was introduced by Senators Katie Duig and Heather Burgums and covers a lot of ground when it comes to election administration. It includes measures to protect the home addresses of election officials, requires county clerks to complete a certification program, and makes changes to election day procedures, provisional ballot requirements, and recount laws. But perhaps most notably, it eliminates pre-primary convention designations, significantly altering how candidates get on the ballot. This bill raises important questions about election security, transparency, and fairness, issues that impact every voter in our state. So let's dive in. Madam Chair, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Josh, and thank you for everything that you do.
So I would love to hear your thoughts on Senate Bill 218, but before we get into that, for those of us who may not know a whole lot about the pre-primary process and everything that goes into that, can you give us a brief rundown on what the pre-primary convention is and why we use that?
So it is a process which I consider fun because I always say I'm one of those nerds that likes all of this political stuff. But it starts with the county, and every single county has a pre-primary convention to elect delegates. But so what that means is every county's allotted their representation based on how many Republican votes they've received. So when they have their election and send their delegates to represent their county, the entire state is represented on who decides who we want on the ballot. So this is the grassroots Republicans, and you don't have to be part of the system. Any Republican can walk into that county convention and say, I would like to run to be a delegate, and have the chance to represent their county. So it's no elimination process. I love inclusion and not exclusion. So there is absolutely no exclusion, but you get elected and you go to the primary convention and you get to meet everybody that's on the ballot at those conventions, from federal to the gubernatorial to land commission. They were all there to earn those people's votes. And it really is a good process.
So from what I'm understanding here, the pre-primary convention is exactly what the name implies. It's a convention that comes before the primary election every 2 years, and it gives voters a chance to meet with, talk with, ask questions of the candidates they're running for federal and statewide office. And then at those conventions, there's a kind of vote where all of the delegates that you described earlier that come from all over the state and make up the grassroots movement of the Republicans come together and cast a vote for the candidates that they have the most confidence in for the upcoming election. And that vote then determines the ballot order of those candidates during the primary election. So having all that in mind, can you share with us a little bit about the good and the bad of this bill, the Senate Bill 218?
Well, obviously you mentioned elimination of the primary conventions, and then also this legislation introduces semi-open primaries. So RPNM stands strongly against both, especially elimination of the pre-primary conventions. Everybody that knows me knows I'm about as grassroots as you can get. And this is a grassroots process to allow the party to choose their best candidates. And that doesn't eliminate, per se, any candidates. It gives them an order of the ballot. So the one that receives the most votes in that convention is listed first on the ballot. You only have to receive 20% of the vote at a convention in order to be automatically on the ballot. And if you don't receive that 20%, you have a second chance by going back and getting the signatures. And then the Secretary of State designates the order after the convention's designation. So there's really no reason why we'd have to have elimination of the primary conventions other than they don't like the grassroots speaking.
So how do you think that eliminating the pre-primary convention would impact Republican candidates and the party's ability to vet and support candidates?
So at that point, then it just puts everybody's name on the hat. So rather than choosing, let's say the 20%, you have might get 5 candidates on the ballot. We might have 10 candidates on the ballot because of the process. As Republicans, we want to put our best candidates forward. We want to make sure that we represent the state and New Mexicans, and this is the process of doing that. So eliminating the conventions just allows anybody and everybody to say, I'm a Republican and I'm going to run for governor today.
So the other part of the Senate Bill 218 is not only the elimination of the pre-primary convention, but it's also the expansion of the current system to make New Mexico an open primary state. That means that if you are a registered DTS or independent, that on election day you can show up at the primary election and say, I want the Republican ballot or I want the Democrat ballot or whatever, without actually changing your party registration. Right now in New Mexico, we have same-day voter registration, which means that you can show up to the polls, and as long as you are DTS, you can register with a party that same day and vote in the primary election. But this expansion would mean that you don't have to change your party registration to vote. You just show up and request the ballot for the party that you want to vote for. What is your opinion on this?
This is a left move in order to lock in the election process to make sure it stays the way it is. So in New Mexico, we are already a one-party system. We are Democrat-led in everything that we do. And so if we go to the semi-open primaries, what they're messaging is that by being a decline to state, a libertarian, or anything else than Democrat or Republican, that you're not allowed to vote. That is absolute misinformation, especially now that we have same-day registration. As I speak to the county clerks across the state, they are also opposed to this. And the reason being is because same-day registration for the November election was overwhelmed and went down. This is known statewide. So now we have same-day registration where you can change your party already, but if you choose to just say, I want a Republican ballot, we have no way to balance. We have no way for credibility, election integrity. When we're counting ballots and people, we always count the hot dogs and the hot dog buns. Well, this case, we're not going to know who ordered the mustard and who ordered the ketchup. And so how do you keep election integrity with that? In the case where it's open primaries, you can totally choose whatever ballot you want and say, I'm going to vote for their less candidate to run against our best candidate. And that's just not the fair process. That's not the way that it's intended. We want every party to choose their best candidate to give the people the choice of who wants to run the state of New Mexico.
So many of the proponents who are in support of this bill will argue that this bill will actually expand voter access to increase voter participation in elections. What do you think about that?
That is completely false. The outcome of voters is based on the ballot. We know that presidential elections has a larger outcome of voters. A semi-open primary, we're not going to gain more voters. Everybody has the right to change their position.
Yeah, point taken. If independents wanted to get involved in the primary election here in New Mexico, all they'd have to do is show up, change their party registration, and then they could vote for the party that they just registered as. But I guess this legislation, the Senate Bill 218, would provide a provision for them not to have to change their party when they get to the voting booth. They could just vote without having to associate or identify with either party, which I totally understand the frustration that a lot of independents feel in the primary process, that they feel shut out of the primary system. And I also understand that there is a tremendous amount of frustration in being forced to choose to identify with either of the parties when lots of people look at the two-party system and say, well, I don't identify with the party leaders of either party, so why should I associate with them? Or why should I register as a party member for that party? But for me personally, having been involved in party politics for the last several years, I would say that there is tremendous benefit to being involved with a political party, specifically because you get to influence the decisions that happen in the party. And I totally understand the argument that you don't identify with the guy who or gal who's leading the party, you don't want to be associated with them, therefore you're just going to abstain. I hear that, but at the same time, let me ask you, do you think that every single person in the Republican Party agrees with everyone in the Republican Party? Absolutely not. I mean, it's kind of a miracle that people like Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Matt Gaetz, Mitt Romney, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Chris Christie, and the list goes on. All of those people are somehow all in the Republican Party, despite the fact that they have different backgrounds, different beliefs on really, really important issues. Somehow we're all in the same party, and somehow we all have to get along. So you don't have to agree 100% with the person who's in charge of the party to be a member of that party. And so I know that this is kind of a long-winded response, but the reason why I bring all of that up is because say you are an independent, you are not otherwise involved in party politics for either Republican or Democrat or Libertarian Party or whatever other party, and you come to Election Day on the primary election, you're ready to cast a vote, you decide you're going to vote for the Republicans. How do you know? How do you know which of the candidates are the moderates, which ones are the far-right candidates, which ones are the center-right candidates? How do you know without a pre-primary convention where you can go and meet those candidates? I mean, there is just such tremendous benefits to being able to go and personally meet all of the candidates who are running for governor, who are running for federal office, who are running for land commissioner, whatever, and meet them personally, challenge them, ask them hard questions, and help them to define their policy positions, and then ultimately cast your vote for who you want to see on the ballot. I mean, there is just a tremendous amount of benefit to being able to do that. It is so hard. Speaking as someone who has run for office before, this last year in 2024, I ran for the New Mexico House of Representatives to represent Albuquerque's West Side. Let me tell you, as a candidate, it is extremely difficult to get your name out there, to advertise what you stand for, why you're running for office, and why voters should support you. You wouldn't think that it's that hard, but it is actually really hard. And it's hard to find your way through the national politics system with all the stuff that's going on the national stage and make a name for yourself and differentiate yourself from the party leaders. And how are you going to do that without a pre-primary system, without a pre-primary convention? I also think that there is a tremendous benefit to, sorry, I'm going back to the pre-primary convention here. There is a tremendous benefit to having a pre-primary convention in that it allows people who are not millionaires, who don't have loads and loads of money on hand that they can use and spend to advertise for themselves, to have a chance at becoming governor or becoming a senator or becoming a U.S. representative, because they come to the pre-primary convention and Republicans come to them. They can make a name for themselves. They stand on the same stage as every other candidate, speak their message, and let voters, grassroots voters, decide who they want to lead the party.
That's absolutely the truth. And I actually made that statement earlier this week in another interview. And that's where I go back to the grassroots. If you don't have $1 million in the bank without a convention in the process, then you are not going to get recognized. The convention allows for you to be recognized. And so somebody look at Fetterman. Look at what he ran against, and he made it all the way through. That's just one example how you don't have to have that much money in the bank to win an election, but you have to be able to get your foot in the door, and the convention allows that.
So if there were just one or two things that you think voters absolutely need to know about this Senate Bill 218, what would that be?
It's just the strategic advantage that they try to put in these bills to be able to lock up the elections. We already know New Mexico, again, like I said earlier, one-party state. What has that led us to? High poverty rates, a failing education system, crime that is off of the Richter scale, weak law enforcement policies. We already know this. We have to balance the state out by a two-party system, and then we can start achieving. I'm not saying that we're going to rule the world, but let's work together like it was set up by our founding fathers and have good debate for the benefit of New Mexicans and not for the benefit of the parties.
Madam Chair, thanks so much. This has been fantastic.
Thank you very much.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, share this with your friends, and we'll see you next time.